Okay, so I love talking about, and you can go earlier, especially if you feel it applies, but I love getting into high school years. Like, what were you like as a teenager? And were you like, this is what I'll be when I grow up? Or did you have any pressure or like, I must go to college, this, that, that? Like, what was life like for you as a teenager?
Yeah, you know what? As you say this, I think back on me in high school, obviously, but I also am thinking about like high school students these days and how much pressure there is on. So yeah, no is the answer. I did not know. I thought I did.
Well,
I was
exactly.
so adamant. I actually, not everybody is, right? But I decided when I was 10, so definitely pre-high school, that I was going to be an actress. And not like a Hollywood movie star. No, a regional Shakespeare actress
Wow,
who was
specific.
planning on making no money and having no like long-term relationships. Like I, at 10, obviously didn't know the extent of what any of that would mean, but I very much romanticized it because there was a local Shakespeare festival in my hometown. I grew up in Santa Cruz, California, beautiful like Bay Area hippie town on the water. And there was in the redwoods would come alive with these like jobbed in actors from New York and San Francisco. And I was like, what is this magic? I want in on whatever this is. So that was my plan. And then I did all the theater,
You did. So that made you get into theater.
And I was like, really, actually, I kind of did absolutely everything right. But, that doesn't always result in the thing.
It doesn't. And how talented you are, honestly, doesn't always go into who takes off.
If you were to be a casting director about 20 years ago, you would also be looking at me going, I don't know what to do with her. I look ethnically ambiguous, question mark, quotes, but I also energetically come across as like a comic relief instead of leading lady, but my voice never matched my look. I was told many times. I mean, it's that kind of stuff where they're like, if we don't know what category to throw you in really easily, then you maybe don't have a career. And I hope, I say that 20 years ago because I hope it's changing. I've seen, certain signs of that. I do live in Hollywood. I have a background at this point coaching a lot of actors and movie stars. So I hear a lot of the inside scoop on that type of stuff. But anyway, so high school me did not know any of that was coming. No. And I was adamant. I was like, I know some actors have like I'll try it for 5 years. And if it doesn't work, I'll leave. And I was like, no, I have no out. This is what I shall do. So I would just like to love on high school me.
I love it.
Also, the story changed.
And during that time too, as you then pursued acting stuff, like you still though were attached to the like, I'm going to be Shakespeare, traveling to all these local towns and really putting my heart in that for those local communities.
I mean, literally.
Like, how sweet is that also, though?
Thank you. Thank you so much, right? Oh my God, I am such a good soul. No, but seriously, yes, I romanticized it, but there is romance in that.
Yeah.
And I don't mean to undervalue romance. Like the beauty of wanting to be in spaces, telling stories while everybody like shares a breath together. I'm getting emotional even saying it now. Like there is something deeply, deeply human about that. And I was drawn to it really early on. And in a way, if I were to be dramatic, that is the connection between what I wanted to do and what I am
doing. Okay, so what happens next? So like you graduate high school and then what?
I was desperate to go to Brown University, which is like the perfect combo of fancy East Coast school, but also like, bohemian theater kids. I did not get in, but I did get into Princeton, which was, as it turns out, extremely hard to turn down, but a real like curveball if you want to have a life in the theater. And I did it. And I met all the right people. Like when you go to a school where you are sort of an oddball, in contrast to the, stereotype, at least, of a student who goes there, you find your people. And then you, in my case, make a lot of theater because there isn't a lot to be made and you just have to self-produce. And so everybody who graduates from Princeton with a theater-y background becomes like a producer. I mean, we know how to make shit happen from nothing. And then I got into grad school for acting. So I got an MFA, a master's program. And that really had been the long-term dream because I had seen those professional actors when I was little. And I was like, this is the way to make your body an instrument, to really know how to, work the lines and work a crowd and work your emotions and make something happen in a space.
Wow. And so wait,
So
so at Princeton then do they not have a
no.
like theater acting background?
They have what's called a certificate, which is like a minor, but there's no major for it. So it was a lot of English students, a lot of like English literature kids.
And is that what you end up like focusing on? Well, yeah,
Yep.
right. Does it like then let me study Shakespeare? Was that like part of it?
Basically, I mean, I will say, God, I don't think I've ever said this publicly. So hi, I'm about to say something absolutely ridiculous and a little bit vulnerable. But when I went to tour Princeton, and so I was like 17, about to turn 18, and I met with the Shakespeare professor. And it happened to be April 23rd, which is Shakespeare's birthday. And I mentioned that in our meeting, or he mentioned it. He's like, happy Shakespeare's birthday. And I was like, also death day. Weird, by the way, Shakespeare died on his birthday. And the guy was like, I don't know if you're going to learn anything here that you don't already know about.
That's all we have. We can teach you his birthday and that he died on the day.
God, that statement is so ridiculous. But also, he was maybe right. I mean, he was maybe right. I was already such a nerd around. I don't think I often bring it into my interviews. So look what you've gotten out of me. Anyway, look, I really got over. I burned out on Shakespeare. It's also a ridiculous statement, and yet I will say that. But for a while there, I really he was a portal for me into so much. I mean, I loved the idea of contemporizing Shakespeare, by which I mean, like, why does anyone pick up something old and find something new in it?
Why? I am still like, what made you want to go to Princeton though? If you were so set on theater, like what was it about it that made you then be like, yeah, this is for me?
I do think it's literally hard to turn down when you get into a school like that. Okay. I was 17. And I was literally sobbing while I was checking the yes, because it was such a hard decision. And I was like, why does anybody let a 17-year-old make a life decision like this? But the reality is, I don't think they could have made a wrong one. I mean, I think, we get the return on investment wherever we go if the return is us.
Yeah. No, I'm not saying like it was the wrong choice. It was just like, oh, how curious. Like that is totally. Yeah, for somebody who's like this. And then
no,
it
was honestly, cool, it was that. Never mind. It was that, and I had a full ride at UCLA, and I just didn't want to stay in California. I love California, back here, but like I just needed to get. I had a real like, sense of curiosity about the East Coast.
So. Love it. Okay, so then you went and then got an MFA. Is that right?
Yep. Oh, I'm a master of the fine arts. Hello.
And was that too, like, you went to do that because you were still holding on to the dream of like,
oh yeah, I mean,
Shakespearean
holding on
actress?
To the dream as a way to say it now because we know I let it go. But at the time, no, I was pursuing.
Hello,
yeah. I was pursuing it.
Of course, that's
and honestly, I spent a year between college and grad school in New York doing like Shakespeare in the Park stuff. I was working at the Public Theater. And then the 3 years after grad school, I was back in New York. But this is also when the dialect coaching started to pick up. So as secondary backup things go, most actors do end up picking up, yoga or fight choreography or hair and makeup or, something that feels like it's in that realm, but another skill. And obviously waiting tables.
Yeah.
The stereotype is very true. But, if there's a secondary skill that's part of the craft, a lot of us are drawn to that. And in my case, I sort of collected dialect coach mentors. There aren't that many dialect coaches in the world. If you've never heard that term, like there's a reason for that, right? But there are these two who basically still coach like most of the Broadway shows. And so any story that needs an accent, any actor who needs to sound British instead of American or American instead of British or Southern instead of Northern, they bring in dialect coaches. And both of those dialect coaches I happen to sort of collect. And they started to throw me clients that they didn't have time for. And I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. But
and how did you get to know them? Was that in the year like between Princeton and then you're in New York City? Let me try to.
It actually, both of them were that year between college and grad school. One of them, I met at like an after party for a Broadway show. I was really good at crashing Broadway show.
See, this is the stuff I want to hear. People try to skip around and then I got an MFA. Hello. Step back. No,
listen. The MFA entailed a lot of crashing parties as well.
Okay.
No, there's a hustle, like whatever the good version of a hustle is, that I definitely learned that year between college and grad school in New York. I was really thrust into, I did wait tables, or rather was the maitre d' and host for a while at Asia de Cuba, which is a Zagat rated,
Wow.
celebrity infused, at least it was at the time, I should say,
Asia de Cuba.
restaurant on on the east side, Midtown. Yes,
Was
it was
it
a
a
big
Cuban
deal.
restaurant
It's, as
or
you
an
can imagine,
Asian
a
restaurant?
fusion.
Okay.
Fusion.
That's great for that. I'm like, yeah, they're a well-known restaurant. I was like, wow, I have never heard of it. It doesn't seem like
It was
something.
a really big deal for a while. I love the fancy people would go
Asia de
in. But I learned
Cuba.
a lot about how to, like, sort of not give people what they want. Like, there was a lot of people who would show up wanting their table, and their table was in no way ready. And I'd be like, wow, I know. Wow, we're so glad you're here. Your table's not ready, but let me make you feel really good in the meanwhile. And I'm like, oh, wow, that was one of the places in which I learned how to be.
Like those skills of handling people's personalities and like
Handling people
their
and making them feel
expectations
held, quite
and
honestly. I mean, there's
yeah,
a
like
facilitation element in a lot
yeah.
of what I actually do these days in speaking in workshops and corporate context, is like literally facilitating. I recently was reminded that the word facilitation has the word facile in it, easy. You're just trying to make things feel easier for people.
Oh, I love that.
Right? So there's like a sort of a social lubricant. There's like a gentleness and
Yeah,
anyway,
but isn't it
yeah.
interesting though to look back and like see like, wow, those skills maybe didn't start, but like really started to get honed and like when I was the host.
100%. 100%. I know. Yes, agreed. And so, yes, during that era, I took a class with one of those dialect coaches. She was one of the teachers at the public theater that summer. And then that other guy I just met, and he was like a really extremely sweet, not skeevy, older Irish man who just had so many stories, like so many theater stories, so many like lore, like beautiful, like, back in the day kind of things, as well as like the stories you need to know if you're going to go into this, of like how the social politics of like when you're coaching an actor, but the director or the producer wants a different thing than the actor wants. And like, so I was just soaking that in. And we used to like get red wine down the street from whatever show he was just coaching. And I would like literally be silent and just listen as he would sort of like vent / share with me the secrets of the world. And so, yeah, I went off to grad school. I got trained in some of that stuff just while I was doing the acting stuff. And so I came back and I really did. They started throwing me clients and I was like, I am a dialect coach, I guess. But I also kept saying, like, just to be clear, this is what I do on the side. I'm an actor.
Yeah. But I mean, there must have been something that drew you to it and curiosity besides the fact that I can earn money doing this
Oh, for
too.
sure.
Like even the fact that you wanted to sit and listen to the like I mean, I think there is too, like when you are so interested in like if you're so interested in theater in general and being part of it. Like I was thinking about this the other day. My first career was as a live sound engineer touring with bands. And I got in from like, let me hang out in this. But then even once I like made it and was a touring sound engineer, when I wasn't on tour and I didn't have local gigs, I just loved the world so much. I would work for huge shows as a runner and as a production assistant,
Yep.
even though I was like a well-paid
completely.
modern engineer, because again, I just loved being a part of
Completely.
the world. So I also get that like, oh yeah, tell me these stories, even if you have no interest in the like actual work he's doing as a dialect coach.
But no,
like
I really did. I remember I was 19, the summer between freshman and sophomore year of college, and I went to San Francisco for the summer. And American Conservatory Theater, ACT, is in San Francisco, and they did I don't know, a summer program for people in the like sort of collegey realm. There was like a training, and I knew if I was going to Princeton, I wasn't necessarily going to have that education, and maybe I could spend some summers, doing more hands-on theatery things. And I had my first speech class. And what does speech class actually mean? It means that you learn this set of symbols called the International Phonetic Alphabet.
My
The
eyes are like
IPA,
glazing over a little
That's
bit.
the thing. That's the thing. And that is the moment, literally, when I was 19, that's the moment when I looked around at my other classmates who were all actors and I was like, everyone's eyes are glazing over. Literally. That was my thought. And I was like, but I get it. Okay, listen, my eyes glazed over too because I'm not a math person and it looks like math. But
I like math.
the other thing is it's like music. When you learn how to read music, you can turn someone else's music, which is on a page, into music.
Yeah.
And so then you realize it's a secret code. And the International Phonetic Alphabet is a secret code to write down anyone's accent in the entire world and for someone else to be able to read, or you later, to be able to read it back and do it.
Wow. Got it. So you were in that class and that noticing of like oh, like you were intrigued. You were turning on instead of seeing other people shut down.
Well, and I think even then, literally, and I think even then I was associating it with, like, I grew up watching My Fair Lady. So, that musical is at its heart about the difference that occurs in a young woman's life when she learns how to talk differently. Her world opens up. And the sort of social experiment inside of that is, do all of us get treated differently based on how we talk? Do all of us get treated differently based on how we talk? Like, what is the actual piece of information that's being transmitted person to person when we're talking to each other? It's so much more than the words, right? And we know that it's also the tone, but it's also our accent. It's also our style of speech. And this, in a way, has been my lifelong journey. So yeah, I can totally date that back to like being a 7-year-old watching My Fair Lady, but then also being a 19-year-old in that class being like, oh, this is so much bigger than symbols on a page.
Wow. Okay, so then we're jumping back to
Oh my God.
I'm a jumper. I'm like, we're jumping back to, so you started to so this is after you have the MFA and you had the connections to these dialect coaches, and then they start to throw you work. You are taking on work, and then you were also, I am very much an actor who can also help you with this. But so did you move to New York City?
Yes. I was in New York. I was producing and acting in off Broadway stuff with friends. And then also, dialect coaching. And the door for that was always opening way easier. I was like pounding at the acting door, trying to get auditions for things with people I admired and not getting the audition, or getting the audition, but not getting the call back. And like nothing was really moving on that front, while the dialect stuff, my name was being thrown around town. Because, look, when you're in your 20s and you have the skill set and you have these mentors, people are okay, I'm not calling anyone out. I truly don't mean to, but where people are going with this. Oh, she's the one to call if we don't have money.
Right. That's what I was about to say, that you were probably helping people like not being cast as the lead in the Broadway.
Well, right.
Whatever.
Or it's like every once in a while I'd get to work with this Broadway actor, but otherwise, it was the off Broadway stuff that still needed, they still had high integrity, right? They wanted to have good accent work.
And then that's going to get them to the Broadway stage because they're going to be awesome at this role. And then
to be clear, it's almost never the actor who's hiring you. It's usually the producer or the director or the theater company. If it's for the whole play. If it's for the whole play. But
right.
Yes,
okay.
But similarly, it is like we're going to get dragged in the reviews afterwards, if this play in any way feels inauthentic and just naming this or feels disrespectful to the community that we're trying to tell a story about.
True. Very true.
And if you don't hire a dialect coach, at stake is how respectful are we being of the community that we're telling the story about, right?
And then people not taking it seriously. And so it wouldn't be, I'm imagining like an actor, but it's more the production.
The actors hire me all the time for auditions.
Got it.
To get that job. And then once you get the job, usually then it's hopefully then it's a theater company that has, budgeted money so that a coach will come in and work with all the actors.
And for that too, if you're coming on, if a producer would hire you, do they have you for the whole length of the show or just for like the 3 weeks practice before? I don't know theater world, so I'm just making stuff up.
No, your question is 100% right. And you know what? Now that I've also been in obviously LA and done the Hollywood version of this, the same question applies. Do they bring you in weeks in advance? Do they have you on set? Oh, such a great question. How much budget do you have? I mean, if they have if they've what's the word, set aside like no money for dialect work, and they've like rolled their eyes because they met one dialect coach once who was super self-important, and like they didn't want that type of energy on a set. This obviously has happened. Then there's often what my dialect agent half jokingly refers to as a dialect emergency. And like the night before, the producers will be like, oh, fuck, we hired a British person to play an American. Oh. And like, you know,
and we didn't think about
right, like
double
actors,
checking that they were good at that.
Exactly. Some actors have a back pocket accent, lovely, but like often it's not just like to play American, it's to play like a 1950s North Carolina American. And again, we go to the respect issue. Like, do you want them to just show up doing like a random Southern drawl because like that's the South? Like, do you want that for your big budget movie that you forgot to budget a few $1,000 for dialect coach? I'm just wondering.
Excuse me. I'm overcoming it. Sinus stuff or something. Anyway. Okay, so we got a little background of that. So what happens then? You must hit a point, or did you end up doing any, like going for Shakespeare, or is it more so that it just keeps taking off in this dialect direction? Like in that you were eventually like,
I
and
had
also
a lot of close calls with Shakespeare in the Park type of stuff that was, at the time quite heartbreaking. And then when I was about to turn 29, I moved to LA, and it was a confluence of a bunch of stuff, but partly it was honestly the financial crisis meant the theater world just like super dried up. It was this tiny little voice in my head that said, if I am going to try to do TV film at any point in my life, like I realized LA prizes youth. And then it was this other thought, which is dialect coaching is something I'm really good at. And the real money, of course, is in TV and film. So I came out here. Fourth thing. It was really cold and rainy, and 10 years on the East Coast, I like killed it. And then by the 10th year, I was like, this winter is really long.
For good reasons to move, all of them. So and when you moved here, did you have like enough like references or like people here, or did you need to sort of like hustle as to be known as, hey, I'm a dialect coach, because like you were for Broadway, and now like, hey, I'm here, like, did you have references or resources here, or was it sort of starting?
It was both, but I had some really lucky connections, and two dialect coaches who are represented by the one woman who really represents dialect coaches. There's like one agent who kind of came up with the idea of representing dialect coaches, and there's only like 20 of us who are working today in both coasts and a little in the middle. Those two coaches started recommending me to that woman. And then I realized that's really the only way to do this out here. Like, I need to get her attention. So I put on my like type A student hat and would just like every 3 months send her a really like friendly, don't forget about me email that was like, here's the people I've been coaching on my own. Don't forget, I have a long history of working my way up. And if there's any TV film jobs that your other people don't want because they're a little too low budget, don't forget about me. And that eventually worked. It took about 2 years.
That's incredible. And thank you for sharing that, because I think so often we don't hear that, or people don't tell those stories of, right? Like, I emailed, like you're saying, much every 3 months.
I mean, not with,
right. But still, it's not like, you tried for 3 months every 2 weeks or something like that, and that gave up. And when you would write, would she reply?
She would reply with like one-line notes that said something like, I haven't forgotten.
Okay, got it.
That was sort of encouraging / discouraging, right? And
got it. Yeah. How do you read that? Does that mean leave me alone? I haven't forgotten, or does that mean?
The reality is, especially when it comes to, if anybody listening, especially if it comes to going after an agent, going after somebody to represent you. Obviously, I'm going to say a big stereotype here, but most people who represent people, their job is to be tough. like energetically. It is part of the skill set that makes you a good agent, to be kind of no nonsense and a gatekeeper. So, I didn't take it personally, I guess is the answer. I didn't take those
Yeah.
emails personally. And I thought, I don't really mind if she's not the like most, lovey-dovey person. But I think that it's my job to just keep trying to do this alone until she takes me seriously, and I might as well keep her posted in the meanwhile.
So in that 2 years, then, were you getting jobs on your own and then still like auditioning for acting stuff as well?
All of that.
Like,
All of that. Yep. Making short films. I mean, all the stuff. Yeah, completely. And then I got exactly what I had thought might happen, right? That I'd requested, which is that there was a SAG ultra low budget movie, which basically means everybody on set is getting paid $100 a day, that no dialect coach, wanted to touch. But the main actor was a British guy to do American, and he did not have a background doing American, and he's a comedian. His name is Matt Lucas. We've been friends now for 13 years. If you saw Bridesmaids, he played Rebel Wilson's brother or roommate. Anyway,
I'm sure I would recognize him, but I can't.
You totally would. He's such a well-known British comedian, but not as much in the States. So anyway, look, I got it was so low budget that he and I shared a trailer. He's also mostly naked with a grown-up diaper on in the movie. It's not a movie a lot of people have seen, but so that was a trailer experience.
But was that from that one agent that you had kept kept reaching out to? Is that how she finally was like, all right?
And it's this tiny movie no one saw called Small Apartments, but I have to say Johnny Knoxville was in it. Billy Crystal was in it. I feel like
I've heard of it.
James Caan was in it. I was like, that was basically my first time on set. And I was like, I think this is very useful. Juno Temple, Rebel Wilson, James Marsden, who I ran into at a cafe like 2 months ago, and I got introduced to him, and I was like, I actually met you 13 years ago on a movie you may not want to remember. Anyway, so it's not like after that the floodgates. It really was. There was just years of really trying to make a name for myself, and there was an inflection point. It must have been 2014. So maybe 4 years. Jesus Christ. I think it was 4 years after that one. And there's a movie about the 33 Chilean miners who got trapped in that mine. And I didn't work on the movie itself, which was shot in Chile, but back in the US, months later, they needed a dialect coach to come in and do ADR. ADR stands for I do not ever remember what, but it means looping your voice, dubbing your own voice if there was like crappy audio sound stuff. So you're basically matching your own mouth to what you're seeing on the camera, on the screen rather. And this happens in almost every movie. Especially if it's a street scene, there's like sirens and cars and things. They block all of that out, and then they have also blocked out your audio. So you need to redo your audio months later. It's a bizarre process for the actors, but many of them are, used to it at this point.
It's part of the job now.
And so if you had an accent in the original and there was even a dialect coach, now you need somebody to be there when the microphone is right there and you're in the sound studio and you've got everything is coming down to these little tiny sounds coming out of your mouth. Then you need a dialect coach even more. So I was brought in to do that with all these, honestly, Spanish speaking actors from all around the world to slightly kind of try to all sound like they're from Chile. It was fascinating, but what really stuck out for me is that for whatever reason, getting that kind of chance to spend time with that many Latin actors meant that they started to share my name. And suddenly every Spanish-speaking actor in Hollywood wanted to work with me. And that is as random as it sounds, except that, I did it. So.
Wow. Wait, and so now I'm thinking too, all of these actors that were on this movie who were Spanish speaking, but they needed to sound like they came from Chile. So how do you, because that's also like, yeah, it's not, that's a little bit different from, you're from London and you need to sound like you're from Texas. So Chile, so like, I obviously it's like, well, you just study the whatever, but then also how are you teaching that? Like, yeah, like how do you
So
prepare yourself for that
it's exactly
to
what
do?
you said. There's research involved. There's research, and there's using the International Phonetic Alphabet to keep track of this sound.
Well, right.
This sound pretty consistently switches to this sound. So you end up with what is, I kid you not, officially called a sound change sheet. A sound
Wow.
change sheet. But it is really like a cheat sheet on any accent in the world. And
Wow.
the interesting challenge with that project was that, yes, it was Spanish speakers from around the world. So obviously you have like Antonio Banderas sounds a bit different from a Mexican actor. He grew up in Spain, he grew up in Mexico. Those Spanishes are different Spanishes, right? They have their own dialects. And here I am coming in with a third dialect. So, and they weren't being, quite honestly, they weren't being that specific about it. What they really want most of the time, they, in this case with quotes around it, meaning Hollywood producers, what they tend to want is clarity. So if English is your second language and you have a dialect coach coming in, yes, there's going to be a little tiny work of like, let's get this region specific sound, but it's going to be 96%. Can Middle America understand you?
Got it. So they like want there to be an accent, to hear an accent, and also we also need to understand clearly what you are saying. Got it.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. And so then from after that, your name's getting passed around town from a lot of naturally Spanish speaking actors and actors. And then, yeah, did it just continue to grow from there? And also at this point, like, too, did you abandon your own acting career yet? Or you still,
Let's see. I don't remember when I officially did.
which also you might still have dreams of acting.
Yeah,
Who am
thank
I
you.
to say
Who are
that?
you? Who are
We
you?
are still young. We still have lives left to live.
Well, yes, and
That's how I believe. I'm
there
42 and I feel like I could have 3 more lifetimes still.
Same, and specifically when you have been attached to a singular dream, there is an inflection moment. There is something that happens when you're like, in my case, did 10-year-old me know everything?
Wait, did I actually want that dream?
Did 10-year-old me, does 43-year-old me need to honor and like, not just honor, like be loyal to what 10-year-old me thought was the way the world worked? And of course, we know the answer to that is no. And then the question is, how do we let that go or shift that in a way that doesn't necessarily, that sort of, I'll just say, like, disrupts the narrative of failed.
Yeah.
Right? Because like that feels like it's, yes, that's a way we can talk about I'm a failed actor. Totally. It is a way to tell the story. But another is like, it was not meant for me.
Yeah.
And I thought it was. And there is absolutely like pain inside of that. And honestly, part of what happens when you're a dialect coach is that you're teaching an accent to your actors off camera in quiet spaces at their dining room table, in their living room, at their trailers, a quarter of a mile from set. Like, what that actually means is that you're holding space for them to practice saying their lines, trying to live into this character with these new sounds coming out of their mouth. And that usually means that we also read opposite them. So I have gotten to quietly, off camera, act off of some of our culture's favorite actors. And it is like so not what 10-year-old me thought. And I don't want to like, sour grapes pretend it is, but it also has been these like incredibly moving moments where I'm like, but in a way, this is the thing.
Look at me, I'm fucking living my dream, but it didn't look like that.
Not at all.
Like
I'm
not in nature doing Shakespeare. I am reading live.
But also like I'm like supporting these people that our culture deeply admires in these really vulnerable moments, because, and this connects to my book and to everything that I'm talking about these days, because when we start doing anything having to do with our voice, all of our lifelong insecurities come out. There's just stuff wrapped up in voice for everybody. And here I was in these quiet moments getting to act opposite my actor while they were feeling vulnerable. And like, hold space for them, facilitate, and like generally make their lives better
Yeah.
and make them act better once they were on set. And like, that's cool.
Yeah, I love that. And I also like love the conversation of that. Like too, I don't ever feel like there's a failure for dreams or like, and yeah, and two, it's like when we have a dream, whether it's when we're 5 or 10 or 15 or 35 or whatever, we don't know what that is. You know what I mean? Like we can have an idea about something and then get into it and then be like, oh, maybe this isn't for me. Okay, the dream was to pursue that or the dream was to explore that, but it doesn't mean like, yeah, like, oh, it has to look exactly like this or what we think it should. Again, with the shoulds, what it should do. Or
There is a
I should
perfectionism
want this
inside of that.
dream. I should want to keep doing this dream. I should pursue this because at one time I wanted it. Sometimes we do, like we get stuck in, is this a should or is this a want? Because at one point I wanted it, so I should keep working towards it. But like, why? Why? If it's not actually like fulfilling you and bringing you joy, and it's just
joy.
I would.
I'm going to share this moment where it wasn't when I necessarily think that I officially, quote unquote, stopped acting, if there was an official, but on that project that I talked about with Matt Lucas, where we shared a trailer, those many years ago. We filmed it, we finished, we wrapped. And then we had a tiny, tiny little bit of voiceover work to do. And because it was such a low budget movie, we all met in the actors' hotel room. And we all met me, the director, the actor, and like the script supervisor who keeps track of the script, and the sound guy who held the actual microphone. And on day one of that project, that director had been this very tall, intimidating man who was very much like, what is this girl doing following my actor around? That was not said out loud. And if he did not think that, bless. But that was the vibe I got.
That was your perception of this man.
I was obviously a bit young and worried. I mean, concerned that I would be getting in the way. Fast forward to that final day in that hotel room when my actor does his voiceover lines. And he does beautifully. And we make a few tiny, tiny little adjustments, but his American accent's like really in the pocket at that point, right? He does his voiceover lines and we're done with the entire movie. This is the final thing that needs to happen. And the director goes, that was good for me. Samara, was that good for you?
That you were getting the final say, basically.
And like, it was so tiny, but I share that because like, it really is those moments when you readjust what joy means to you. And also, I'll just throw it out there what power means. And I don't mean like power over people, right? But like that sense of sovereignty of like, I am a self-possessed person whose opinion matters. I did not have that at that point in my career, acting wise.
Yeah.
And suddenly I had it as a dialect coach, and big, imposing men were turning to me for the last word. And I was like, this is something that 10-year-old me did not take into account. How could she?
Yeah. Wow. Okay, I've noticed a couple times that you said inflection point, which who else would use that word? When you're talking about like life transitions or whatever, which I like love. I was like,
you said you like math.
I love it. I was like, inflection point. What is an inflection point?
It's just a point when things change. It's like a pivot, but the pivot happens on the inside, I think. And an inflection point to me feels like it's looking at it from the outside.
But as a dialect coach, what is an inflection point?
Oh, I don't know. It's not a dialect term.
Oh, really? It sounded like a dialect thing to me.
Inflection.
I thought you were like using.
No, it's a math term. No, inflection is definitely a dialect term. I mean, it is a speech term, right? Inflection is about like, does your pitch go up or does it go down after this certain point? No,
but that's because I was hearing it that way and then thinking like, oh wow, she's using it, but it kind of is like it's a
sure as a metaphor.
Yeah.
No, I'm just using it to mean like there's a real before and after.
Yeah, but that's so I was wondering if it did then also relate exactly like to the dialect that way too, like which a point of change. Okay, so your book, Permission to Speak, makes sense, but so. Why were you like, I must write a book? Like what happened in then this journey of being a dialect coach? Then like, I must share this with the world about the power of our voice. I don't know if that even is what, but like,
I'll
yeah,
tell
like,
you, because it really wasn't the dialect work.
yeah, where did it
And
come from?
the summer of 2018, I got to coach Gal Gadot on Wonder Woman 2. I spent the summer in Washington, D.C., in a hotel across the country from my husband and child, and, followed Gal while she flew. I mean, that's kind of what happened. There's a lot of flying in that movie. Anyway, and that was, just to bring it down for a second, the summer that we were 2 years into that guy's presidency, and we were being inundated with the pictures of the kids that were being separated at the border. And all of my activist friends, myself included, were feeling really fragile and really burned out and really like, what should we be doing besides just protesting? And I think all of us were kind of looking for something that would feel like we were of value. And we were also hurtling towards the 2018 midterms, which I didn't have anything to do with, but I knew that was like a moment when perhaps the story might change. And in the middle of all of that, while I was in DC, a friend asked me if he could put me in touch with moveon.org, which is this organization that finds candidates for office and offers them support. And sometimes that support is financial and like training, and sometimes it's coaching in things like public speaking. And I was like, yeah, I have no idea. I mean, I had a hunch, but I had no formal background of any sort in public speaking coaching. But I was like, are you kidding me? Like, yes, sign me up. So I got this call from MoveOn, and they were like, we'll get you in touch with a few other coaches who've been, brought in, and they'll get you up to speed. And then you'll just start working with however many, candidates you can over Zoom. And talk about inflection points. That was a moment. And I didn't know it, I didn't know it. Obviously, I just thought I was like doing something else in addition to dialect coaching. And then I was in those sessions and was like, oh my God. Like, what I know now that I didn't quite have exact words for then, but was very much present for me in all of those sessions, was so many absolutely magnificent people who are exactly the type of leaders we need more of in this world have trouble showing up as magnificently as they are in those big high stakes moments that matter because of the shoulds, to use your language, right? Because all of us have collected so many stories, cultural and personal stories, about how we talk wrong. We talk too fast. We say like too much. Our voice is too high. Our voice is too low. We are too long-winded. We are too funny. We're not funny enough, right? All of the things. We're too old. We're too young. And this is, of course, I'm speaking to women, but also really a huge amount of us, And, people of color, immigrants, queer folks, anybody who just feels in some way marked as different in how they speak. And I'm using that word marked from linguistics, right? There are markers to how we speak to bring back all of the My Fair Lady of it all. And we just go around knowing on some level that we don't talk right, or that we're going to get judged for how we talk. And so we better try to sound like someone else. And boy, does that fuck us when we try to do public speaking. And especially when we're trying to actually show up as ourselves and be like, I should be your next leader.
Right. Because that's not even like, hello, you've hired me to deliver a motivating speech or tell my story. It's like, no, choose me. I really can make a difference.
Yeah.
I know it. I'm going to
both
show up for you.
Both of those other examples as well, right? When pitching, but there's somewhere it's less important, right?
Yeah.
Like whatever. If you're shilling on behalf of your company, public speaking nerves will still come up, but less of the, oh my God, and I have to be authentically me. But then there are those spaces, like you said, where really that authenticity question is very present. Okay, great. I'm supposed to be myself. Which version of myself? What is that? What does authenticity even mean? And how do I actually do that? Even if I want to, how do I actually do that through all of the habits I've picked up my entire life on literally how to hide so that I am less intimidating, so that I'm more intimidating, so that I, like whatever the thing was I needed to do to get by all those years.
Yeah.
has now become a habit, and I don't know how to undo it, to just like actually show up with joy in front of my
Yeah.
public and move them and get the yes.
Yeah, because most of us, yeah, we are not like, don't stand out, fit in, sit back, blend in, be polite, do this. It's all these
Socialize,
shoulds
socialize,
and more
socialize.
of like
And
that.
totally understandable, right? I mean, part of what I'm here to do is say, like, as we think about what our habits are that have held us back, can we do so very lovingly and without shame? Because so much of the shoulds is also about shaming ourselves. Why can't
1000%.
I
Yeah.
hack it? Why did I pick up this habit? Why didn't I pick up this other
There's something
habit?
wrong with me.
There's
Yeah,
something
we're
wrong with me.
making ourselves wrong all the time. And it's like, but who's, but who?
But
Who
who?
made these rules?
Yeah, yeah.
Wait, who said that?
Were
What about
these
me?
rules? Were these rules about how to sound powerful in society built for us, with our best interests in mind?
Oh, so wow. So that like starting to support these candidates,
It
you
really
were
lit a fire. I was like, oh, I have thoughts. Many more and many fierier thoughts than I realized. And in the middle of that, that same summer went and heard Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez speak. She hadn't even been elected yet. She won the primary in New York, and my New York friends were like, this lady's fascinating. And then she came out to LA. And I had just gotten back from my Gal Gadot summer, and I was like, I feel like I should go hear her speak. A friend had an extra ticket. I was like, maybe like people speaking in public is my business. Like maybe that's what I should. Yeah. So I went, and on the drive, I tell this story in chapter 4 for anyone who would like the full version. On the drive, I called my mom, who's like a total feminist, and my mom goes, "Oh God, thank God, she really needs you. I can't stand the way she talks." And I was like, Mom, thank you. I hear the compliment. I don't need that. I think she's doing just fine. And my mom goes, no, I'm serious. I can't take her seriously. And I had this like real instantaneous response to her where I went, or she's teaching us what being taken seriously might sound like. And then I had to unpack what I even meant by that. And at the heart of my book, it is not about how to make your voice more powerful. It is about reshaping what we even think a powerful voice is supposed to sound like, so that gentleness and silliness, and I don't know, I got interviewed by a woman who said that she's been called perky. Perkiness can also be something we listen to and think of as a different kind of power. And
right.
We all have biases. This is something that this is a real gorgeous gift from linguistics. Linguists will say accent bias, or even just more broadly voice bias, is something we all have. We all categorize people based on how they sound. So, okay, good to know. And what would it be like to start to get a little bit more cognizant of that? What biases are we accidentally perpetuating that, quite frankly, keeps us like voting for leaders that we don't want?
Yeah, huge. Wow. Obviously, all totally resonates with me. Stuff like that. See, I don't have shame for the fact I say the wrong word.
And then I say like literally like tongues and lips and
but
mouths.
People have in the past tried to make me feel bad for that, and so then I took that on. Oh, I'm not educated enough. I don't know those words. If I ask somebody what a word meant and blah blah, and they don't know. And I just a long time I had to be like, fuck it. I like this is who I am, and excuse me. I hope that I humanize it for more people out there, that you can be talking to someone. I'll regularly be working. So the should thing came from me actually not saying the word should. I gave it up too. There's many stories, but I wouldn't let it come out of my mouth. And so there are other words that I will be working on, and I will correct myself in speech, like while I'm holding a presentation or this, and I'll be like, hey, sorry, I'm working on not even saying that. I'm working on not saying guys. Hey, you all. Because that's how I can actually reprogram myself. if I can correct myself while I'm doing it and not, whoops, next time, whoops, next time, whoops, next
Well,
time.
and so just to name it, what you're doing is two different things, right? One of them is that you're working on being intentional with your language, right? And the other is that when you mess up a little, as we all do, because mouth's mouth, you are unshamey and modeling permission around, pivoting in the moment.
Yeah. And so it is, but like I said, I've had people that have really like made me feel bad
Well, look, as I
because
like to
I'm not a
say,
certain way or I like, and I'm just like, yep,
as I like to
that's
say, we all have a voice story, and our voice story, like a money story, it's not like there's only one, and it's not like there's only a plot-based beginning, middle, and end. We have a billion myths and half-truths and maybe even full truths that make up our voice story, each of us. What we were told when we were little was allowed in terms of big bursts of emotion, or in terms of interrupting, for example, in terms of what kind of arguing is considered respectable and what kind of arguing is considered rude, right? And we take that for granted, and we just assume our way, what we were told is the way, unless we have, a moment of actual, kind of crashing up against someone else's way, like when we get married and find out we have different communication styles, right? Like this is the thing. But the reason I bring all this up is because that also means that we are constantly foisting our voice stories on someone else. So if I think that it's rude too, and you do the thing, and that's what's happening when when any of us is being like, shoulded by someone else, adjusted, offered. Oftentimes it also happens very well-intentioned, I hate to see you undermining yourself by saying the word like so much. So if you could take that out of your vocabulary, that would be really helpful. And you're like, wow, thanks, uncle / manager / boss / whatever, older figure who knows everything. Totally, totally thanks. It's part of my speaking style. I'm good.
Love that. And yeah, no, and I get it. It's usually because probably someone made them feel bad for that, or like, oh man, I don't get it so much anymore, but like typos even on Instagram stories. Before Instagram stories had captions, I would often quickly caption what I was saying in the Instagram story because as a like nursing mom would be like watching them without the volume. And so it was like, I will help people too.
Totally.
I don't know how many people and even dear friends of mine were like, Trisha, you really need to make sure that these stories, not even a post. I do post still all the time, typos, whatever it is. You need to delete that. No, I don't. Like, you need to edit. Like, it just looks so unprofessional. Like, who's going to hire you or work for you if you're misspelling things? And I was like, well, I don't think those people are for me then. Like, it's okay. It's okay. Like, it's okay. And like, it's okay. Like, you don't need to stress about.
Well, look,
and like,
what you're
love
bringing
too
up
was like, hey, you really don't need to stress about like my perfections or imperfections or what
there
you
is also
saying.
two different things going on here, right? And this is something that's very present for the work I do, especially in corporate spaces. One of them is like, what are the rules of the space that is employing you? And what are the obligations you have to stick to like, how flexible are those rules? And especially, if you're a woman, if you're a person of color and you feel like your natural speaking style isn't working in that space, you're not getting heard, you're being interrupted, you're being undervalued, then obviously what we're talking about is short-term fixes. It would be irresponsible of me to come into that space and be like, just sound like you. And there is also like, quite honestly, longer term strategies around how to either change that work culture or get out of it. And then there's the other thing that you're talking about, which is when money is not on the line and it's our own space and we're just trying to figure out how to, be less perfectionisty, then getting those little bits of feedback is sort of like, thanks, that's not what I'm up to right now.
Yeah. But also realizing again, like, wow, that's like, usually most things are not about us. It's their own like stuff, baggage, ideas, this, that, whatever, all the things.
The ego of how the little tiny like chemical burst of delight that you get, a fake joy that you get when you correct someone because it makes you feel better.
I don't know. I feel like they must. I don't even know. I can't imagine what people's brains are that like really stress about people's typos. Bless them. I'm sending you some more peace. But so talking about your work now. So yeah, so you started to coach those candidates. You saw this. Did you then end up moving more into totally like coaching people to speak and speakers and that in a way from the dialect coaching? Because yes, you eventually have written this book.
Yeah,
And then,
over many years at this point, because that was 2018, right? But in early 2019, I had the opportunity to pitch a podcast to iHeartRadio. And I had been thinking like maybe podcast is the next place to go with this. And I had brainstormed titles with a group of friends, and we'd all come up with permission to speak. And it was like, what? Yes. And iHeartRadio like bought it in the room, and they were super into it. It took a year before it came on the air, of just like, honestly, paperwork and waiting. But in the meanwhile, I had this wildly lucky moment where a friend introduced me to her literary agent, her book agent, who was coming through LA for like 2 seconds from New York. And I had just recently pitched this thing to iHeartRadio. So I was sort of in pitch mode. Like I didn't have a lot of answers, but I had a lot of really juicy questions.
And what would the podcast though that you were, okay, I have an opportunity to pitch. Did you know that you wanted it to be about? Like, yeah, like what was even, yeah, like what were you, without figuring out the amazing title, like what was your, like, this is what were you pitching? Like, what was the show?
Yeah, I still have it. It's like a 1-page pitch that I sent to them to get the meeting. And it's exactly what my book is about. I mean, like, I was really onto this stuff. Like I had figured out what I cared about. I didn't necessarily, as I say, have answers or have a lot of like frameworks or like, tools. Like I really had to work that out in the doing. But in the fall of 2018, another thing that happened that same crazy summer actually is that I got this call from Princeton, and they were doing their first massive women's conference in like 20 years or something. And they had Justice Kagan and Justice Sotomayor, who both happened to have been Princeton alums, and a bunch of other like luminaries. And they were looking for breakout workshops. And apparently they were looking for people on the artsier side of things, I have been told. And they were like, that girl who wanted to do original Shakespeare.
She knew his birth and death day.
And death day. How can we get better than that? That is artsy. So they asked if I wanted to speak on how to use your voice. And I was like, talking to the lady, I'd never been asked before that to speak at a conference. So I was like, tell me more. How? And she's like, it'll be like 50 people. It'll be, women only. It'll be, non-performers. So obviously this is just the only thing that they have in common is they went to Princeton, but like, it'll be, age 22 to whatever. How do you feel? And I was like, okay, I should say yes. So and it happened in October, and I'd already been working with candidates. So I kind of brought to that all these ideas that had been forming from working with people. And right before I flew out for it, I found out that 465 people had signed up for my 50-person workshop. And they'd had to move it to the biggest auditorium on campus where I had like seen Willie Nelson perform when I was an undergrad. And so that was already like market research I did not know I was doing. And that hour 15 I had with that group was a total like validation and a half. Like people stayed after. People were like, I've never heard anyone talk about this. I feel so heard. I feel so seen. It was really like up 22 to 77-year-olds. Like it was a wow. And I didn't know what to do with it. And so my first thought was podcast. But then I met the book guy. And was
it was about sort of the ahas that were coming up to you working with about how these people are important. They have things to say, but they are like holding themselves don't know how to present themselves, or they're using the voice. So it's sort of like, hey, you people in your room, I don't know what you want to be and do or whatever. Yes. It's like stuff, but too like, yeah, but like, I guess, yeah, like what was it? Just like because it wasn't permission to speak. Was the name of that? What did they put it as? What did they title it there?
Such a good question. I went really baller because I was, working with Gal at the time, and they asked for my title, and I was like, I'm going to call it "How to Use Your Voice to Get What You Want."
How do you get your voice to get what you want?
Which is almost the subtitle of the book, and then we switched it out. But it is the reason
confidence, I guess. In
the reason we switched it out is that I think that you have to contextualize. You have to understand what the context is of what you want, right? I mean, I'm sure you've thought about this with your book, but like it's a thing. How to use your voice to get what you want does not mean how to use your voice to screw people over. right? There is like a real call inside of that for some sort of like right speech kind of, Buddhist act of like, what are we really doing here? Like, how do we actually make the world better in how we speak?
Yeah.
Which anyway, so yeah,
But reading that title, if I'm someone who's going to Princeton or whatever, invited to this event, I would make up like, okay, this is going to teach me confidence or, like how to present myself, how to show up. Yeah. Like how do I want to get the things I want? But that means like, I've got to be the one like activating it. Like, so that's what I would be getting from that.
That's right. Yeah. How to use your voice to get what you want. I mean, the reality is that plus the title, permission to speak, in both cases, there's the voice, there's the speaking, right? There's like, I am unafraid of talking about the minutia of the human voice, right? I mean, this is what having the International Phonetic Alphabet background has done for me, right? We can talk vowels and consonants and
every time
variation.
You bring up the phonetic background, I'm like, oh,
and in both cases, what you want and the permission side is hinting at what we're really talking about here, which is that so much of how we present in public, how we decide to be visible, how we decide to be seen and heard is about something that has nothing to do with the sounds coming out of our mouth. It's mindset, and it's like a sort of a, I mean, I'm going to get woo here for a second, but sort of like a spiritual contract with yourself or with what it is to be human. Like, why do any of us put ourselves through a high stakes moment where we're going to be seen and heard? I mean, usually it's because something needs to change. We need to get a yes. We need that promotion. We need that job. We need our idea to get funded. We need our candidacy to get voted on, but in all of those cases, there's a spark of something beautiful, and there's humans coming together to listen for that spark. And like, that's so lost in how public speaking is usually taught. It's like, don't say ums and uhs, and like, don't move your hands too much. And I'm like, because I have my acting background, I'm like, that is not how humans move humans. Let's like strip this back and all of the fear-based shit. I mean, this is why the title of your book is so totally the same work I do. All of the fear-based shit gets in the way of our joy, gets in the way of us getting yeses, gets in the way of our audience feeling joy. And the alternative to a fear-based approach to public speaking is obviously a love-based approach to public speaking, and that is just not something people talk about. So I'm like, all right, well then I guess I'm going to talk about it.
A love-based approach? Is that what you said?
How do you show up in a public forum in a way that makes the care that you have for the thing you're going to talk about spread?
Yeah.
How do we become care generators? Like, it's so obvious because it's so like what has made any of us actually lean in to anything we've ever heard ever as an audience member, but it's not how most of us approach our speaking opportunities, because of course we're thinking about, I'm going to be seen, I'm going to be heard, I do this wrong, how do I like hide that I do that wrong as aggressively as I can?
Ooh, so it sounds like you have then moved more is that mostly into public speaking?
I mean, inevitably,
coaching.
I had to start turning down dialect work in order to like launch the book and finish writing the book and launch the book. Yeah. So yes. Mm-hmm.
And what do you see? Yeah, like where are you at now? Are you full in with like, let's go, permission to speak? How can I spread this in many ways? Are you focusing on the speakers?
I am, because what's under a lot of this is this is a real social justice issue. When we're talking about what leadership sounds like, what we're really talking about is what kind of leadership do we want to see more of in the world, and how do we be that? And how do we support that? And then all of the bias work that I'm talking about, there's got to be anti-bias training. Then there's got to be like conversations in corporate spaces about what isn't working in those corporate spaces, what's making people burn out, what's making people quiet quit or loud quit, or just not show up to begin with, not want to apply. So it's like a well-being conversation inside of a public speaking conversation that's actually about like everything, you know? So
Yeah.
yes, I've had such cool opportunities to go in and speak at this place, not just speak, but do workshops at this point in so many different industries. I mean, I got to work with MAC Cosmetics over the summer, and I get to work with a government agency in the fall that I'm not supposed to say the name of in public yet. And and like, you know, the difference between those is enormous. And yet we're humaning together in spaces with words and sounds coming out of our mouth. And then what, you know?
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up too, because it's like, yes, I said, yeah, you're focusing on public speaking, coaching, and you're doing speaking, but also your book, Permission to Speak, is not like, buy this book because you want to speak on a stage or use your voice for, like, it's, I make up, right? It's for anyone. And that's when you're going to talk to people at Mac, because they are humans who use their voice every day, whatever they're doing to sell the makeup, right? Or
Yeah.
whatever, you know.
I mean, I will say, I think that anybody who is thinking about public speaking should buy this book. But I also am saying that because I'm somewhat like taking us all along on this journey of redefining public speaking. I mean, what we're doing right now is public speaking.
Right.
When you turn a camera on yourself and, you know, do a 90-second reel, like I have done on Tuesday mornings for the last year and a half, you know, that's public speaking. If you want to consider having a quiet conversation about whether or not you should get promoted, where there's you and one other person in the room as public speaking, I encourage it. I mean, I like joke when I make up new definitions of public speaking, but I think it really is literally like leaving your house or not even, but heading into some space where you are being seen by people who don't already know everything about you, and then saying something that matters. And in that case, like, yeah, you should pick up my book if you're going to be public speaking, but also like, you're probably already public speaking.
If you are a person who speaks.
If you're a person and if you want something,
you happen to speak
if you
in
want
public.
something and you're trying to maybe get it. You know, I just did a workshop. Actually, I'll totally plug this, but I just did a workshop that you can buy on my website that's called How to Pitch. And it's like, it is a space to talk about, of course, literally, like I pitched my book and I pitched my podcast and I sold them hard. And like, let me like actually unpack what I did. And I've coached people on this now, but now I'm like training, right? So it like exists as a standalone thing that you can watch. But the other part of it is like, let's actually even talk about what it is to pitch. Like, pitching can mean a billion things, first of all. Like, obviously, pitching a book to potential publishers has a different vibe than pitching yourself to the public to run for office, which is different than pitching an idea to a news, you know. But, like, there's actually a huge amount in common. And if we're talking about humans humaning, like, let's all orient towards what's really happening in an exchange of care, of like, I care about this. How do I make you care about it too?
Well, I was even thinking, super small example, but real, pitching to your group of friends that you want to do what you want to do
100%.
the next time you hang out, instead
pitching
of what
to your
they
8-year-old,
do.
pitching to
Because
your
all
8-year-old.
those people, you know, like that is like,
100%.
right? People are afraid to put their needs and their wants first. It's okay. Yeah, whatever you guys want, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And then you're not usually feeling great. Like, yeah, let's pitch that you get a say in this friendship and what y'all do too. And that doesn't make anything bad. Or like,
I love that you brought that up, because I actually talk about that in the workshop. And I'm like, can we take a second? Like, what works for you? What persuades you?
Yeah.
What works when your kid wants to go to Target to just like see if there's some more Pokemon cards? What works and what doesn't work? Because there's actually something profound inside of what doesn't work.
Right.
That is like all of our, you know, the fears that you listening may be carrying around on, like, I don't like to pitch because I'll seem salesy. Like, right. That doesn't work on you either, but what does? You know, like, we have so much more wisdom on the inside than we sometimes think. And this is also the challenge, right? This is part of why the whole concept of shoulds is is so present. Because shoulds also come from the outside. We often have them on the inside, but that's because we've internalized them. But we have like this really deep wisdom that does live inside of all of us, but is sometimes a quieter whisper than those shoulds that scream at us. And so part of this work is about getting back in touch with that and like really listening for that whisper that knows, for example, that if you stand up in front of people and a little tear shows up in your eye when you talk about something that matters, it is not something you need to apologize for. It is actually a way of showing that you're real and allowing the people in your audience to trust you. But we have so many shoulds around seeming emotional for totally understandable reasons having to do with being called things like crazy, that it's very hard without a little bit of, support, and maybe in the form of this conversation or in the form of the book. It's really hard to listen to that deep, deep inner voice that's quieter. That's like, oh no, this is juicy. This is what they came for.
Yes. All right. I feel like we need to meet up and exchange our books in person.
Yes, please. Yes, please.
A lot of alignment there. Okay, I need to go, but I'm going to ask you one of my final questions, which is, what is a go-to to raise your joy levels? What is something that you do to boost your joy when you might be feeling a little funky?
Honestly, these days it's a lot of like taking walks, especially when the weather's nice. And yesterday I took a long walk. I ended up in the cute little like neighborhoody area of where I live, and I ran into 3 friends. And then as I was leaving them, two other friends who were walking across the street yelled my name. And this is like, I live in LA. Like, it's not, I mean, I'm in a cute little East Side, neighborhood of it, but that doesn't happen every day. And I was like, God damn it. That's it. You want to be seen. You want to get the blood pumping. You want to get some hugs. The end.
Love it. Love it. That happened to me last week too. I was like feeling a funk, and again, I told her before we started recording, I live in an area with bears, and there's always these like, oh, a bear on this street, whatever. And I was like, I'm going to walk outside and try to find this bear, which is like ridiculous. It probably would have spurred her to do it in my car if I actually wanted to find the bear. Anyway, I did not find the bear, but I ran into 6 people within like 2 blocks. And I started talking to them. I was like, oh, I didn't see the bear, but wow, I had some like social interaction I didn't know I was looking for. Like,
That's right.
And I'm like, that doesn't happen every day when I go for a walk either. It's like, oh, wow. Okay. Hi.
Yeah.
So funny. All right. I've loved talking to you. I'm so excited for you and for me now to get your book. And thank you for following your curiosity and your interests and everything that led you to now sharing these messages. Thank you to the little girl that fell in love with Shakespeare that took her on this journey to here.
Thanks, man.